We'll find out.
Yeah.
All right. So it says we're live, which sometimes we are, sometimes we're not, So,
It's like a
but
30-second delay.
there's a delay, and sometimes it likes to cut in just a little bit later. But either way, we're live. Welcome to Marauder Mondays Live. This is Magic Prepper, and I'm not muted. And
I was like,
yeah, no, it got me. Well, good old YouTube. But if you don't know who I am, I'm Magic Prepper. So I appreciate you being here. But more importantly, we have GreyMan Prepping here tonight to discuss some things about preparedness as well as what's going on in the world right now. So thank you for being here. If you want to introduce yourself to anybody who might not know you.
yeah, I'd say I'm relatively new to the YouTube verse. I've been here almost a year. December it'll be a year. Have a pretty decent channel, at least I think so. Other than that, I like to preach and spread the word of preparedness. Everything from your current events and politics to things like food storage and all kinds of stuff. That the whole realm of things, pretty much. I like to touch on various topics.
Well, and one thing that I definitely think you're doing a really good job with is interviewing other preparedness channels and talking to other content creators in the preparedness community and trying to give everybody a platform and as well as give everybody another opportunity to hear, more opinions, advice, or suggestions from different perspectives,
Yeah, no, I enjoy the heck out of that, man. I've met a lot of great people, even in, like I said, the viewers, the other content creators, some amazing people in this community.
Well, as much as my wife says that I like to listen to the sound of my own voice, I do I do enjoy hanging out with you and as well as all the other creators that have come on and joined me in the live streams, and try to talk about preparedness because it is nice to pick somebody else's brain once in a while, get some different points of view on preparedness, and also, see if you might have opinions or even ideas that I haven't thought about before. I think that's a big part of what we do is trying to, broaden our horizons, you might say, right?
Yeah.
So I think real quick, I'll go ahead and just say hi to some people in the chat here. Northern Girl Hobbies, thank you so much for being here, modding tonight. I appreciate it. And I do think you all are aware that, if you get whacked by the mods, it's because of you. It's not them, okay? And then let's see, we've got Harvey Black 2 is here, Gemini Dakota, Stars Prepper. Let's see, Chief is here, Mark Olson, Virginia Woodsman, Patient Prepper. Awesome. Good to see everybody. And I'm sure I missed a million. Make me feel better. So, but no, thank you guys so much for being here. It's really an honor every Monday to come on and hang out with everybody and actually interact directly with the community and not just, put out standalone videos that I get to talk to you about after the fact with all the information I was wrong about. So,
Man.
One thing I want to bring up real quick before we start diving into some of the nitty gritty as to, what we're talking about tonight, because the title of this live stream tonight is Preparing for Full Collapse. And mostly what I was trying to relate to in that title was the idea of the supply chain and the idea of just our system, the system that we rely on currently when it comes to acquiring, our basic needs. So, but, before we get into that, something that you might have some insight on that a lot of people, might not have, because not many of us are sitting in the position that you and I are in, where we make content for other people to consume about preparedness. Do you feel that by doing this, by starting your own channel and by putting yourself out there and networking with the community, do you feel almost like more motivated to be even more prepared than you were before?
Honestly, I do. And the reason I say that is because to create content and to be, ahead of the game, I guess you could say, is you do a lot of research in the articles and the things that's going on in the world. You pay more attention. You try to hyper focus on certain things. So by doing that, I'm like, okay, well, I'm missing this and I'm missing that. So it makes me sure up a little bit some of the things that I discuss on the channel. Be it from, let's say, books to gear to freeze dried foods or whatnot. Things just start to appear to me like, wow. Or when it comes to the current events per se. Like, man, things are getting bad, because now I have viewers that will send me information, or let's say in my Discord, people will share articles and things from all over the US and around the world. So it's making me even more aware. So it makes me feel like, things are getting pretty nasty out there, and there's things I need to get done,
Yeah, no, and I have to agree with you, like being part of the community kind of forces your hand when it comes to consuming the information, right? You kind of have to put a little more effort into getting all that info and doing the research. But it's also it's not, I'm not going to say peer pressure, right? But it's like you feel almost like that team mentality of needing to be part of that community and wanting to do your part in the sense of, providing good info or helping people, whatever it might be that you might not, have that much drive to do otherwise by not having yourself in that position. So I do think it's a unique place to be. And I do suggest, like, no matter who you are, like your technological skill or whatever it is, if you have something that is useful and imperative for the preparedness community to know about, like, start a YouTube channel or do something along those lines, because it really is a very good experience in the sense of, finding out a lot about yourself, learning things, and then also networking with some really good people. So I just thought that'd be a good thing to talk about here in the beginning, just because so many people might not ever take that leap. And I guarantee all of you that both GreyMan and I were probably not ever in the position where we thought this is what we'd be doing on a Monday night here in 2021. So
I would tend to agree. I would have never thought that not only starting a channel, but that people would depend on me for specific information or content. And real quick, before I want to say, everybody, I'm not typing tonight, but I want to say I see everybody says what's up to GreyMan and all that stuff like that. So thank you all for being here. So anybody I missed, I do appreciate seeing you guys and all the shout outs. Appreciate that.
Yep. Yeah, and that's what's awesome too is most of the community here visits all the channels, and they're in a lot of the live streams, and everybody kind of knows each other. So another awesome part of being part of the Preparedness Network. So, okay, well, T. Fisher, thank you so much for the super chat. Never required, never necessary, okay, but I do appreciate it, and I always say that I want you guys to use that money to prepare better for yourself before you try to help me. But any support is appreciated, because this is what we do, and it does take a lot more energy and effort than anybody wants to admit. So, but it is just what it is. So, preparing for full collapse. When I say that, and I'm sure you can, feel me out on this one, GreyMan, but at the end of the day, we kind of have this feeling. It's kind of like this feeling in the back of your head that that at some point, one day we're going to wake up to go to the store and find out that it's like not open, or that they didn't get a restock, or that a truck never showed up, and that they're waiting on product before they can open, or whatever it might be. And I think, we saw some of the preview of that last year in the spring, but I don't think we saw the worst of it. In fact, I feel like the worst of it's actually still on its way, and that the people who should be in charge of trying to remedy the situation clearly don't have much of an interest in fixing it, because there doesn't seem to be much motivation to try to find a solution. Are you on the same page with that?
No, I would agree. There's a huge sense of urgency in regards to a lot of things that are going on, and per The Economist, where I've been reading, they think even if there's some sort of slight resolution to some of the issues that we're experiencing, it's not going to resolve itself for several years.
No, it's not supposed to. And like just recently, I talked about the fact that even basic, coffee distributors are saying that they're going to have a shortage into 2023. And if coffee's telling us that, I mean, what else is going to fall in that same exact category? That's a major industry. It's not something, obscure. I mean, coffee drives this entire country in many ways. Even if you don't drink coffee, somebody around you probably does. And that means there's a lot of consumption happening there. So it'd be, out of place for a company to come out and say something like that for no reason. It's more of a warning, really, or an alert to let everybody know, like, hey, we want to give it to you, and we want you to have it, but there's no guarantee we're going to be able to. And just projecting things that far into the future always concerns me, because it's really not in a business's interest to, show everybody their cards in the sense of, negative transaction. Just my 2 cents. All right. So it looks like we're having fun in the chat.
Yeah, I'm watching it too. I'm enjoying myself, man. I love the trolls. Gotta love them, man.
You know what? And here's the thing. Even if somebody is just here to like kind of voice their opinion and doesn't think that what we're saying is valid or has reasonable information behind it, that's fine. Whatever. It's okay. But for me, I just don't waste my time going to places just to get upset. So I hope that there's some kind of constructive criticism or at least, solution related feedback when it comes to that stuff. But generally there's not. So
I would agree, brother. If there was at least some sense or some reason for whatever the statements or things that they say, because I've had some actually good conversations with people that start off like, hey, you said this or that, and that. Then we have this conversation, and it builds on there, and then they become a nice positive subscriber because I can see their point of view, they see mine, and then it builds from there. It's just there's unfortunately, like you said, the majority of it is just people that are just very hateful, disrespectful, and create division.
Right. And, we do know that there's also an underlying reason as to why people try to target channels like ours, So obviously, and that does happen. In case everybody's not aware, I mean, people do go onto our videos and immediately report them for whatever else they want to decide they need to report it for. They go onto our videos, they try to, do all the thumbs down and all that stuff, whatever. That's fine. They can do what they do, but it does make things a little more difficult. So it's kind of just part of the whole ride here. But hey, Fat Man Prepper, you got troll tendencies. I'm all about it. You know what? You work in certain industries for long enough, you learn how to troll each other on a regular basis. So I'm good with it, trust me. But there is a line that can be crossed, and sometimes we have to be aware of what that line might be, right? So, but whatever, either way. And I did see Tyler M said Magic Lisper. I do appreciate that you pay so much attention to my voice that we have to discuss this regularly. So
I love it.
Hey, it's all good. I suffer from chronic dry mouth, which is why I drink so much coffee. And then it doesn't help because it's not hydrating at all. Okay, so let's get into some of the shenanigans happening around the world right now, okay? And I think the big one that everybody's talked about, and it's just something I want to bring to everyone's attention. And then what I did was I found an article related to it that kind of has an interesting tone to it in the sense of another company basically saying, well, what the heck? And that's the Augustin Farm situation, right? So they're stopping production through the rest of 2021, saying that it's due to the lack of food product and the lack of reliable shipping of product and everything else that's happening with the supply chain. Another indication of collapse, because when you have a company that specifically designs their product for preparedness and then cannot provide it any longer, that should be some sort of a red flag, I would assume, correct?
Yes, no, I would agree. It's when you see it hit that hard, especially something that we are very familiar with, it definitely throws up a lot of red flags in regards to if it's hitting them, who else is going to hit them, or who else is it going to hit? Because now they're not alone in this market, because you figure a lot of the freeze-dried foods, a lot of them derive from certain suppliers. A lot of them do it themselves in their own manufacturing plants, but the ingredients themselves, it's what's creating the issue. So it might hit Mountain House, ReadyWise, and so on and so forth. It might just spread onto those. And those are a lot of those companies people depend on for their freeze-dried products.
Right. And so here's what's interesting. So the article that I found was actually a company or a news, I guess, source. I don't know. I haven't really seen this one before, but apparently they talked to the CEO of ReadyWise, right? I'll go ahead and share that on the screen here real quick, because that is just, what we do here, which is what I say every time for some reason. So, okay. Am I sharing? I believe so.
Yeah.
Everything wanted to jump across from me. So basically what ReadyWise is saying is that for a preparedness company to not be able, to not prepare for things like shortages in the supply chain seems like a bad business practice, is basically the gist I'm getting from this article. And ReadyWise is coming out and basically saying that, we're going to have everything still, and we're going to keep our stuff rolling. So very interesting that another company would try to put this out there. And of course, this is great marketing, even if they're lying, because they, know that there's a good chance to jump on top of Augustin Farms customer base right now. But at the same time, it is interesting that they are criticizing Augustin Farms for being a preparedness company that wasn't prepared for these supply chain issues. And, I just thought it would be interesting to bring this to everybody's attention, because, that's how business works. And I guess there's probably some validity to that statement of, shouldn't they have been prepared for this? This is what they do, right? So ReadyWise is jumping on this and saying, hey man, like, we're going to have food and we're going to pivot and figure out ways to keep production and keep orders flowing. Interesting that this would happen. Now, based on the supply chain itself, I think there's a good chance that down the road, even companies like this could find themselves in a really tough position. But I don't know. It brought something else to the conversation, because it's bad business to not have your product, right? You can't sell something you don't have. So it's not like Augustin Farms would do this on purpose or want to be in the situation. But then to have another company be on top of the scenario a little bit better, at least in their opinion, to the point where they can continue production is something to keep in mind, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's pretty intriguing. I'm curious to see it over the next 30 days and so on, and how this all plays out. Like you said, it could be a marketing aspect of, hey, buy us now, because I've noticed that even all the companies are slowly raising their prices across the board.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and let's be honest, shipping is ridiculous lately. I mean, anything I order takes forever. And I mean, not just takes forever, but also has really volatile tracking. Like, you'll have something that says it's shipped, you'll check out the tracking, it tells you where it's at. The next day it will tell you it's not shipped, and yet the tracking will tell you it's in a different town, but in a opposite direction as to where it should be going in order to get to you. So it's very almost rocky at this point to expect shipping to be on time or even ever arrive, the way things are looking anyway.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And I've seen here in the chat a couple of people mention something like, oh man, where was it? I missed it, of course, but I want to say it was Texas Surplus Pro said, makes you think that Augustin was in doubt that their product would ever be needed. And there might be some truth to that. Like, hey, we found a great opportunity to sell this stuff to a bunch of preppers and people who want to be prepared, but they're all idiots, so they're going to buy it from them. They don't know anything. And then suddenly they're like, oh crap, we don't actually have the stuff that we told them we would have for them if they needed it. So that's an interesting perspective, actually.
No, that's very true, man. That's love it.
Yeah. So I thought that was just a good thing to start with, just because it's interesting when you see these things start to occur, how they pile up, and I personally would expect this to happen to other companies as well, not just Augustin Farms.
Right.
But it doesn't. If ReadyWise is correct, and if other companies are correct in the whole situation where they've prepared for these issues in the past and now they're ready for them here in the future, then you would see, if only Augustin Farms was affected by this, I would almost consider that to be a pretty negative look for them as a business.
I was trying to see if I could find some information real quick, but it doesn't look like it, because I wanted to see if there was someone had mentioned it in chat, so I was curious about it to see if there was actually a side-by-side comparison on sales versus ReadyWise versus Augustin Farm, and see who is actually dominating the market with that, because that could also play a role in that. So I was curious, but I'll look for it down the road.
Yeah. If someone has the same exact amount of inventory but outsells the next guy, I mean, they might have a little more time before this happens to them. So totally understandable. Mark Fallows says $50 Vanguard. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So let's see. And a lot of stuff comes through, and guys, I'm not trying to miss everybody's conversation. So make sure if you have a direct question for me or GreyMan that you tag us, just so it highlights it. If you type in Magic Prepper or @Magic Prepper, it'll highlight it orange and I'll see it. And it makes it just a little easier to pick it out of the chat, instead of trying to find the specific questions versus you guys talking trash to each other, which is totally fine. So that is something we're going to start off with. And this is just where we are right now. And I think, especially, GreyMan, talking with you, when you see companies like Augustin Farms have to shut down production, that's a huge business decision. It's a very bad business decision that you're forced to make. No one makes that decision willingly. So, just seeing that from that one specific company you would say that's a huge indicator as to where things are probably headed, correct?
Oh, I would agree 100%. And I know just as well as I know, and hopefully a lot of the folks know, if we look at the big picture, this is just one cog in the machine that's being hit.
Yeah. And the total collapse, a lot of it's going to be based on supply chain. The supply chain has created the style of society that we currently live in that people are comfortable with. And that supply chain collapsing then has the ripple effect to negate all of those comforts, which then turns civilized society into uncivil society almost immediately. And that's why it's such a big deal to keep an eye on these things. People will constantly say, and you'll see it in comments and on videos all the time, like, oh, another food shortage video or another video about supply chain. We know, everybody's talking about it, right? But the reason behind it is because it's such a big deal, because if that actually stops at any point in time, I mean, things get bad very, very quickly, right?
Yeah, no, I'm sitting here reading that, and some people are saying, someone said something, I think it was Bizza Rizza Jizza, said something about he went to his local gas station. They had shut down. They're usually 24 hours. They had shut down at 11 p.m. because there was a shortage of either gas or employees. And I wanted to touch on that real quick.
Sure.
Well, I went to go get gas the other day, and I have this big, huge habit of anytime I get to a half a tank, I fill back up just because I'm that guy.
Makes sense.
But there were several of the pumps were either bagged, which I thought was interesting. Usually that only happens around hurricane or stuff like that season. And also some of them were just, they wouldn't accept, you had to go inside to pay. I don't know what that meant, but it was just something I noticed, and it made a mental note to myself, like, okay, something's up. But it's like you said, it's fuel, it's gas, it's food, it's parts, it's lumber, it's bad,
It's really bad. And, I don't think people sometimes really grasp like the extreme size of this whole logistics system that we rely on. And real quick, I saw some people tagging in the chat. I want to make sure we address that. Mark Olson says that Mountain House dominates on complete meals. Augustin dominates on ingredients. So that's good to know. Let's see. Kelly Strain asked if I've heard about the canned roast beef recall. Yeah, I did hear about that from Pinball Preparedness, I believe. So it's just definitely something to keep in mind if you guys, have your preps and everything else. Make sure that you're constantly kind of aware of these recalls and stuff, because it would be really, crappy to get botulism in the middle of SHTF. Just my opinion. So
yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. And, Fat Man Prepper says Augustin's family run. ReadyWise is a large corporation. Yeah. And that makes sense. It's true that large corporations are going to be able to pivot and adapt to these situations much easier than smaller family run businesses. So totally get it. And like I said, I have nothing against Augustin Farms. I don't want to put that out there like that. All I'm going to say is that this is an interesting scenario to happen to a company that's completely, immersed in preparedness. To have them be not able to deal with what's happening right now. I mean, and then that's, if them as a company can't do it, I mean, imagine people like us trying to survive these situations when they hit us directly. Okay, so SR says this, that there was a podcast where somebody was talking about the government maybe forcing Augustin Farms to produce products only for them for a few months, and they're not allowed to say it publicly. And that's interesting. Okay. So I don't know where people get that information or where that info would have been sourced in order for someone to come up with that concept. But, there's always the possibility of that kind of stuff happening. We know with the national emergency situation that we've been under for years, or forever, basically at this point. Yeah, right. Like there's like 33 live national emergencies at any given point. But that does allow for the Defense Production Act to acquire things like contracts ahead of anyone else and orders ahead of anyone else when it comes to anything that the government decides is important. And yeah, I mean, them deciding they need food that can sustain and last over the general population is definitely a reasonable concept. Let's see. I did see Russ Ion or something like that. What do you think about diesel vehicles versus gas? I own a diesel truck. I know there's a couple of gas stations in my area were out of gas but still had diesel. I think that there's pros and cons, right? I mean, diesel vehicles and diesel engines tend to last longer, right? And I believe, with biodiesel and stuff, it's a lot easier to utilize alternative fuels for diesel engines and stuff like that if there's ever a situation where there is a shortage or where we're literally in, grid down, no one's pumping gas anymore. And I just think that the average person doesn't necessarily need a diesel vehicle, so that's why they're not as popular. But yeah, I mean, even if you wanted a car that was diesel, like a Volkswagen TDI or something like that, I mean, I think diesel is a great alternative option and probably a great primary option. Honestly, if my truck was offered at a diesel, I probably would have tried to get one just for those reasons. You know, buy my wife's car with regular gasoline and then a truck with diesel. It's nice to have one or the other depending on what's happening. So, and yes, I do notice you kind of see the fluctuation. Sometimes diesel is easily available when gas is not, and vice versa, you know?
Yeah, I see someone tagged me. Universal Prepper says, what about Southwest Airlines canceling 1,800 flights due to bad weather in Florida? There's probably some truth and some faults to that, as with anything. Florida is used to nasty weather. We get storms on a consistent basis. In my area in Central Florida, I didn't really see it rained, but planes fly all the time in rain and lightning. They're built for that.
The lightning capital of the world.
Yeah. So in my aspect, thinking about that statement, it makes me think that it's probably more towards the labor thing is becoming a huge issue because of I'm trying to watch my words here, but what's being pushed on the employees themselves, a lot of folks have either gotten fired or left their jobs, which is creating this big hole, this vacuum of folks that want to fly, but there's not enough people to fly them.
Yep. And no one wants to admit that these, different rules and guidelines are going to have any negative side effects. So, of course, and regardless of the side effects that we're talking about in the sense of the labor shortage, they're never going to want to place that blame on anything that's being done from any authority, right? So obviously there's other reasons for why this is happening, but it is, the timing and everything else. It's gotten to the point where it's almost insulting that these companies, as well as our government and everyone else, has this idea that they can just say this stuff to us and have us just buy it at face value. I think we've gotten to the point where everyone's just aware of the fact that like nothing is what it's said to be any longer.
Yeah, this the government always likes to sugarcoat it. They don't want. My assumption is that they team up with media and put out this narrative or whatever that they want to put out there and sugarcoat it because they don't want people to panic. Because once that leads to panic, of course, that leads to breakdown and so on and so forth. And we all know, we've been seeing it across the board with the labor issue. And people always think, well, where are the employees at? What happened to all the employees? You know what I mean? Well, we know what's happening to them. They're finding jobs either elsewhere that support their. Respects their decision on what they want to do. I'm trying to be very careful in my wording here.
Yeah. There's been a purge lately, so we have to. We have to survive the purge. It's just one night. Don't worry.
No. Yeah, I know, right? Oh man.
So this whole thing right here. I mean, one of my favorite things is like we're issuing a tremendous apology, like just so tremendously huge. This apology of ours, right? It doesn't help anything and doesn't do anything for anyone, but this is just what we're trying to do here. And it's just one of those things. I mean, it's the reason I already had this pulled up before that conversation began was because it's once again another example as to what's happening in the world to really give us a wake-up call. This is such an indicator for things to fall apart. When you can't get air travel to maintain some level of efficiency and you can't keep things on a schedule and you can't get people from point A to point B, human beings are a huge resource. There's a reason why things are called human resources. It's not, hey, friendly people that want to make you feel better, right? It's human resources. And what that does is, it limits people's ability to travel, which often is for work. So another cog in the whole system is breaking down because now you're limiting the human resource factor for moving people around and them being able to get things done that they're trying to get done. So if you want to look at this flight situation in the same light as the supply chain scenario that Augustin Farms is dealing with, they're all part of the same program. It's all the same on just-in-time delivery system that we're expecting to work flawlessly 24/7. This is just talking about moving people around rather than food product.
I see the two things I wanted to address. Rock crawler, yeah, I saw Texas did that, and also Florida put out some information in regards to companies doing that too well. They're getting fined and whatnot. And then the comment right below that, Chris Patrick says that people are getting sick of slave wages. Well, here's the problem with that, and maybe I'm going to rub someone wrong with this whole what I'm about to say, but you can pay someone $25 an hour if you like. Raise the minimum wage to 25, 50. Why not 100? I mean, it's just fiat currency, but if you look at inflation versus that, God, man, there's a whole mathematical equation to this. But let's say you're getting $25 an hour now, but that steak that used to pay, let's say, $10 for is now $30. So you're still gonna, no matter what you in your mindset you think that's going to be a livable wage, the cost of goods is always going to supersede that. You got to look at those numbers. Unless you're part of the elite, the massive wealthy rich, either the middle class, which they're trying to remove, or the poor class, or whatever you want to classify that as, there's always going to be that redundancy of we need more money, and it's just all it's going to do is push the cost of goods higher and higher and higher, and then some folks are not going to be able to even afford that.
Yeah, and here's one thing I'll say, and I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate here because I think there's definitely some validity into people being taken advantage of when it comes to employer-employee relations, right? And I think for a very long time that everyone benefited from each other. So employers benefited from employees willing to accept lower wages based on the fact that, there was only so many jobs available and they had to take what they could get. But employees also benefited from the employers being willing to pay those wages while also offering, full time and stuff like that. What we're seeing now is that because of this kind of regression into saying, well, I'm not going to come work for you, was actually an interesting read I actually read recently where somebody tried to apply to a lot of different jobs. And what they were finding is that there's a lot of false advertising going on out there in the business world right now when it comes to employment. And it's not that it is people lying about, what it is they're trying to offer, but everything has like a caveat to it. So it's like, hey, we'll offer you full time and $18 an hour after 90 days, once our business gets back to the sales that we used to have before everything happened last year, right? And so it's like, and I, being in an industry prior, where I was working with a lot of people directly, regularly, and a lot of entry level positions and stuff like that. I think that yes, you raise the bar to a certain level where businesses can no longer sustain and they will close and shut down because people cannot afford to pay, basic entry level employees $20 an hour, or else those entry level jobs just don't need to exist anymore because people are in the business to make money and make a profit. And at a certain point, you can't make a profit off of what you're offering unless you charge ridiculous prices. But there's also that plateau that you reach where people will not be willing to pay a certain amount for some products, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think it's both ways at this point in time. And I think some people are right to be upset about how they were treated in the past because there was definitely some exploitation going on in the sense of what people are willing to do, right? But now it's kind of come full center because the people who are still willing to work hard and who were always there, especially through the previous year, I don't know, like a lot of medical professionals, worked extremely hard and didn't get a raise or anything like that. In fact, a lot of them lost money or lost hours and stuff like that in order to accommodate the slowdown, are suddenly now being threatened to not have a job or being told they have to work 80 plus hours a week or whatever it is, because these businesses are scrambling to save their lives while the employees are, basically the ones that are bailing the water out of the boat. So it's just both sides are struggling and both sides are frustrated, and I don't see it resolving very easily. Just my opinion.
No, and there's a lot of truth. Like I said, we both have good points. And look at Walmart. Most Walmarts are saying we're going to offer our employees $15 an hour. But as you notice, the decline in employees being replaced, the janitors are being replaced by machines. The cashiers are being replaced by go check yourself out aisles. It's becoming more commonplace for these companies to thin out the herd per se and have machines do their business. They make this big purchase. They know it's going to cost them, but over an extended period of time, it's going to benefit them because then they have less people to deal with.
Yeah.
More pay,
recently I tried to pick up a propane tank and it took me like 20 minutes because the one person working also was the person who had to go get the tank and do all that stuff for me, right? So like that, and that's just, you know, a little example of that. But this is where we are, and this is what's happening. And obviously, like what's happening with Southwest and that whole situation, same exact scenario in many ways, but in a different, for a different reason or different motivator, I guess. Prepper Now's here. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. You're always welcome to be late. Don't worry. I know how fashionable you are. Let's see here.
Great channel. Great channel.
Russ Ion says, I have a different channel that focuses on prepping for those living in apartments. I'm a bit younger, 25. Maybe we could do a live stream someday. Hey, you never know. And listen, you know, do what you can. And here's one thing that I know GreyMan will agree with me on, and it's something that I suggest to anybody, anyone who starts a new channel or wants to put out advice or tips on prepping and wants to like do the YouTube thing. You're going to make 100 crappy videos before you figure out what you're doing. And that's like, so don't be discouraged and don't feel like you're not accomplishing anything until after that point, because at that time you finally had a chance to really figure out like what it is you're trying to accomplish, your identity, and what you're trying to put out there in the sense of good information. So you can probably attest to that, right, GreyMan?
100%, man. If you're going to start a channel, there's a lot of things that may discourage you, but just keep on trucking, man, because eventually it'll all play out. It's you know, there's going to be people that may say don't do this or don't do that, or you know, give you crap or whatever. You gotta have thick skin in this game, man. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and you know, and I don't talk about it very much, right? But I am pushing towards that 100K mark, and I think that's insane. It's insanity, purely. And if I can reach that goal by the end of this year, that would be super awesome, because I would really love to just like finish 2021 off strong, right? But what I will say, and just so everyone knows, it also took me 8 months before I even got to 1,000 subscribers. Okay.
Wow.
And that was with regular content being put out on a regular basis and me figuring out what I was bad at and how not to make crappy videos. So, but those are all things that you guys should definitely, you know, keep in mind if this is something you're trying to do. So, all right, let's see. Okay. So Shade Tree Prepper said we were pulled out of a cashier line at the grocery store and made to do self-service. You know, and that's happening. People, I've seen that too, where the cashier's like, hey, this one's open. But you're in line for like the conveyor belt service-oriented cashier, and they're saying, hey, you gotta go over there. I mean, it's open, right? So that's where we're heading. That's exactly what's going to happen. Automation is going to continually take everything on. And I believe, I want to say, I think I talked to Prepper Now about this actually, but the concept that automation is going to take over most of those roles, especially when it comes to things that people don't want to enforce, because automation doesn't have a you know, a what if factor. There isn't like a, oh, we'll let it slide this time factor. There's solely, hey, you're going to do this or not, and you'll get the green mark or the red mark, right?
I was trying to find something to add to what you were saying. I wish, because I see some people saying Terminator and stuff like that, and there's a country that just released a robot that goes around and it reports back to. There's a whole thing. I wish I could find the article on it, but yes, there's a robot now that reports things to a hub, and then people get dispatched, and it can also ticket you and do a bunch of other stuff. This is in another country, but as we all know, something that happens in another country slowly rolls its way to the U.S. doors.
Yeah, because that's what we like to do. So, all right. So, you know, getting back on track here, I did want to say, let's see, there was a comment from Prairie Man who asked if I heard about the blue tongue outbreak in North Dakota. The deer populations are getting hit hard. So much for depending on nature, grow your own food. What I want to say to that is like, yes, I've heard about that outbreak, but the important factor of that particular conversation is 100%. I agree with you. The idea that you're going to go out and just hunt for all your food after SHTF happens is ridiculous. Do not just assume that's what's going to happen. If you need to learn from history at all, during the Great Depression, the deer populations were wiped out in many areas because everyone else had that same idea. And those populations can't sustain everyone that lives in the city suddenly becoming a hunter overnight. So,
right.
that's it's not a good way to prepare. Yes, hunting can supplement, and it is a good skill to have, and especially in the sense of bushcraft survival, you should have some concept of trapping and tracking and everything else. But at the end of the day, like considering hunting a reliable food source is a bad idea. It's not good planning, I would say.
Yeah, I wouldn't depend on. You got to be diversify. I guess the way you want to get food. Yeah, sure, you can hunt, you can fish, you can have non-perishables. You can have freeze dried. So it's good to have all of it. You know what I mean? Because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket and depend on that. Because, like you just said, we all know through history that everybody is going to turn to the woods and they're going to probably eat everything, even things that people would not expect to eat, from like raccoons and possums and all the other stuff like that. Yeah, it's going to hit the population hard. I hope people are depending on that.
And everyone that says that the only rifle he needs a 10-22, just created that problem for us all. So thanks a lot. All right, so let's see here. I did want to move to another conversation here about this whole collapse situation, and this is trying to just kind of give everybody an idea about the gravity of the scenario. Okay, so because unless you really understand like how large this whole situation is, it's hard to understand why it's such a big deal. Like, why does this matter? Why can't they just figure it out? Why don't they just fix it? So basically, this article from Fast Company, which clearly is a reliable source, but like I said, I check out a lot of different things and a lot of different sources because I don't trust anything anymore, right? But honestly, I found a lot of these, blogs and stuff that you can find to be more informational and more factual than what you find in mainstream media at this point. But this whole article is basically about how the shipping containers themselves are a huge issue, and there's a huge shortage of them. They're also a big part of the reason why costs are rising and why the cost of shipping itself is going up. But that the shipping situation itself, maritime shipping containers around the world to try to get product to different places, is a $14 trillion industry. $14 trillion. So, I mean, if you talk about this just one industry, you're talking about what, 2/3 of our total national debt, which, maybe doesn't sound like a lot because it's only 2/3, but in reality, our national debt is out of control. So 2/3 of that being, one industry on its own is pretty intense.
Yeah, so, the shipping container is a nasty situation, and there's so many pieces to that puzzle. Just the cost of shipping alone is, I think someone said about 600%, because it used to be $2,000-$3,000 to ship something from, let's say, Shenzhen, China over to the U.S. And now it's, up to 20 or 30,000. It just keeps on rising.
Yeah. And even the containers themselves. I mean, you used to be able to pick up a shipping container for like $1,500, $2,000, right? And now they are like 10 to 12 grand, possibly even more. I don't know. I haven't kept track at this point because once they went out of my price range, I stopped looking into it. But what I will say is, like, this article does mention that 90% of the world's goods are transported by sea. Okay, so only 10% of other forms of transportation is where you're going to get your goods from. What that means is that it's, like it says right here, your fruits, your gadgets, your appliances, all of it is packed in these steel containers, which there's a shortage of, which there's a shortage of labor in order to unload them and load them as well. And 90% of everything we rely on for our just-in-time delivery system, as well as for our, basic quality of life factor that we're all trying to, have on our daily basis, is coming to us from a boat. And if we can't even get these boats to unload in the ports right now, how are we going to sustain the standard of living that any of us have right this second? I mean, it's slow, but it's slowly getting worse. And we're going to slowly have to adapt to not having things and to not being able to get that product we are looking for, or to get used to the idea that when you go to the store, you're not going to actually be able to get what it is you thought you were going to get that day. And this is kind of just part of the whole equation. I mean, it's just impossible for this thing to magically resolve itself overnight or in any kind of a decent time frame. What are your thoughts on that? When it comes to how much we rely on this and how fragile it is. I mean, are we already at that point where it's going to continually decline because it can't keep up right now? Or is there a point where it can suddenly kind of recorrect course? I don't know. What do you think?
Man, to be honest with you, being that the situation the way it is right now, to resolve it is going to take a lot of manpower for one, because they're so backlogged in regards to trying to get all the shipments. I've looked at some research on it, and it says no matter what they do, let's say they hired 100 employees, right? Like you just got them out of nowhere. It would still take that much because you have 65 plus ships out there on the let's say the coast of California, right? That need to be unloaded, right? Well, once you unload that, those ships still have to travel, transatlantic or whatever you want to call that, back over there and then get supplies. So there's still going to be delays and issues, no matter how long it takes it to catch up. I think it's just going to continue to escalate until it falls in on itself. If that makes sense to you.
Yeah, no, it does. It's kind of like you're scrambling to not let the last piece fall, right? And so the scrambling is what we're witnessing right now, at least in my opinion. And the fact that, I guess what bothers me, and this is just, you guys can discuss this in the chat or let us know what you think about it. But what bothers me is that it seems like from a logical standpoint and, from an armchair quarterback situation that, with all of the resources and access to the things that governments have access to out in the world, you think that there would be a way to solve this crisis, or at least try to create some sort of buffer or give people a little bit of a break from this whole scenario. And it just doesn't seem like that's happening. So, and look, I am not the guy who wants to see federalization of anything. I don't want to see, the government step in and start doing all the work for everyone and taking over industry that we don't need them to be involved in. But what I am saying is that there is so much that can be done that doesn't seem like it is. And I just wonder, if you feel like there's just an environment right now where people's hands are tied, if there is any kind of, purposeful intent behind why they wouldn't want to solve this problem, or maybe if you think that there's some other things going on in the sense of, escalation with other nations that stops us from being able to, push the envelope any further. What do you think is really causing this blockage?
Man, that's a good question, and I'm sitting here thinking as you're saying it because I'm thinking of the whole puzzle, because I was still thinking about the ships. And then they're getting the employees to offload those ships. But then we have the shortage of truckers. So I saw someone talking about the rail system and folks being mandated and all this other stuff like that and creating issues there. The airplane situation. It seems like, this is my opinion, I'm only speculating, just to kind of put it out there. If it does collapse on itself, right, then the magic of the federal government comes in and swoops and saves the day. And then we become dependent on them. So it almost seems like there could be a possible narrative to let everything fall in on itself, and then they kind of try to swoop in and try to resolve the issue by federalizing everything. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, unfortunately, that's like the logical route, which usually I like to take the more fantastical route because it's more entertaining, right? And it also has, generally less repercussions because,
right.
This crazy scenario, the crab people, they're doing it. I knew it, but unfortunately, I have to agree with you that there seems to be something else involved with why this stuff is happening the way it is. I'm going to put a poll in the chat. Don't vote if you don't want to. You don't have to put your name out there as being somebody who's on the fringe, I guess. But I'm just going to ask you guys in the chat, give you guys something to kind of jot down. But, is the supply chain collapse intentional? And that's an easy question for you guys to answer because I saw a lot of you talking about it in the chat, and I thought, that'd be an interesting thing for us to kind of see what everybody's feelings are on it. So, but moving from there, and I mean, getting a pretty large majority of saying yes at this point in time, it's hard as somebody who is a fan of science fiction and literature and stuff in the in the past of what other authors have theorized about what the future will look like and how dystopian society develop right over time. It's hard not to see this being that catalyst for moving things into that direction. And I guess, a lot of people talk about, the reset, and they talk about, the NWO situation and everything else related to it. To me, I guess something that you'd have to consider is that it would be a lot easier to install that kind of a system if everyone was on the same page. And I guess in my experience, it's easier to lower the bar for everyone than it is to raise the bar for everyone, correct? And you see it with standardized testing now, right? You see it with school and education. The bar just continually drops in order to try to accommodate more and more people. Whether or not there's reasons behind that, that's up to you guys to decide. But what I'm trying to equate it to is on a worldwide scale, on a global scale, would be easier and more efficient to make everyone a third world country before trying to make everybody one country, because then everyone's the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's,
that makes sense. And it's funny that you say that, because if you look at it, it seems like that's the direction that we're headed.
I don't want to like assume that. I don't want to say that. And, then you start going down rabbit holes and everything else.
Right.
But as people who want to be prepared, and this is something that, I think should be discussed more often. And I think it's not, because unfortunately we get put into the fringe groups very often, right? The people who are off the wagon and, acting crazy and have all these crazy ideas. Obviously preparedness is, ridiculous and has no real purpose in modern society. So these people are just loose nuts that don't necessarily understand how real life works, right? But obviously we know that's not true. So we look at these things and we have to try to connect the dots. We have to try to project what is going to come down the pipeline. We have to know what's coming our way, because we want to make sure that we can prepare for these situations before they arrive. And I think part of our job as preppers and people who want to be ready for whatever might happen is to look into the future and try to speculate as to what might occur. I have had people in the past, especially in chats and stuff like that, and comments, say things like, well, this is pure speculation and that's, misinformation, and it's not, there's no point of, discussing this because it's not factual. But you can't look into the future. You can't look into that crystal ball with anything other than speculation. And I think you're doing yourself a disservice by not trying to at least anticipate what could be coming your way. I mean, right? Am I off kilter on that?
No, it's I was reading in chat, because some people got some interesting things on there, and man, I lost my train of thought because I had something great I wanted to say, but then I forgot. Because I was thinking of a few things, like there's in government, or in our country in general, or the world, you could say, there's only select few chess players, but many chess pieces. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's how I look at it. And I experienced something at Walmart the other day, and I hate going there, but I had no choice because of what the daughter needed. But anyways, I was videoing the freezers because they were empty. You know what I mean? And this lady walks up and she looked around, and it was funny that she said this. She was like, "Am I missing something here? Am I unaware of something going on?" And I kind of snickered to myself, thinking, man, if she only knew, if she was watched, our channels like ourselves, and she would be like, okay, well, she would know what was going on. But she's in the masses that has no clue, and just has no clue why these freezers are empty at specifically a monster like Walmart. Yeah.
And like I've said earlier in the chat, so if you weren't here, this is new for you maybe. And if you were here, I'm saying it again. Business doesn't want to not sell you things. So businesses are not wanting to be out of products. They're not wanting to not be able to make the sale. So this is definitely a forced situation for them that they're having to deal with. And it's just is what it is. I'm pretty sure Walmart doesn't want to not take your money. So,
right.
All right. So let's see here. Michael McGowan says 1984. Yes, that's a great reference. And it just is what it is. Samantha MV says, we with you at Magic Prepper. Like, thank you. And I appreciate that. And like, that's a good thing that we have going here. A really good network, a really good community. And luckily people like us have the ability to discuss these things without feeling like one of us is, needing some medication or something. So
we'll all go through that whole, you're a fear monger, you're crazy, you're a tinfoil hat. That's just something that preppers or people in the preparedness community get slandered with all the time.
Yeah.
But it's people just need to open their eyes and just look beyond waking up, going to work, coming home and repeating. Because once you see the broad picture, then you start seeing all these things, and then you're like, okay. And here's how I look at preparedness. You know, people have said, oh, you know, are you preparing for a comet or an asteroid or, you know, the zombie apocalypse and all this stuff like that? And I look at them like they're insane. Like I'm looking at them like they're insane. And I'm like, man, I'm preparing for anything and everything, be it something as small as loss of a job or, you know, a hurricane or tornado or storm or whatever, you know what I mean? It provides my family safety in those times. And that's how I look at it. There's no, people need to counter, because there's so many hit pieces done on folks like ourselves, you know?
Right.
Which gives the people the wrong inclination of what preppers are and why we do what we do. You know, we get blamed for different things and all kinds of stuff like that, when most of us have been doing this for decades. You know what I mean? We're not the people that rush out there and freak out and buy a bunch of toilet paper, you know?
Yeah. Well, and, you know, unfortunately, it was a very marginalized, you know, genre to be in back in the day. You know, survivalist was what, you know, preppers were referred to, and it was considered, you know, kind of a crazy thing to be a part of. So luckily things are going more mainstream. And what I will say about our community as a whole is that one thing I think we're very good about, and I think that in general a lot of the preparedness creators like on YouTube and stuff like that are good about, is that there's not much like gatekeeping going on, in the sense of, you know, making people feel like they can't get into the community, or making people feel like they can't, you know, be part of preparedness, because the more people that are involved, the better it is for every single one of us. It's not just about, you know, well, I don't want everyone to know I'm going to go buy all the canned chicken, you know, so I got to let everybody know, it's time to get some meat in a can, because that stuff is going to get more and more expensive. And so instead of gatekeeping and like keeping information to ourselves and then not allowing other people to get involved, it actually benefits us all to get as many people involved as possible. And I think that that's a very good positive about this community. I do want to say, I saw a couple of super chats come in. Night Diver 5, you know, said the beast system is being set up, and like, yeah, I mean, there's definitely correlations to that kind of stuff happening around the world. So, I mean, it's easy to see how people would put one and one together, you know. Scott says, in order to build back better, things have to fall apart first. And I mean, that's a true cliche, right? You gotta tear it down to build it back up again. Everyone knows that, right? But you always build it different than what you got. If your house burns down in a fire and you're fully insured and you're able to build that house back, you're not building the exact same house floor plan and every tile in the same exact spot once again. You know, that's not how that whole situation works. You can have a different house. And I honestly think that is what they're trying to do here, is build a new house. One that probably has a lot of security devices and has the fence that, you know, faces inward to the house rather than outward. Just my thought, I guess. Fat Man Prepper says, you know, let them call me crazy, a crazy whack job for prepping. I be having last laugh when I'm eating steak and they're eating the government issued rations. And like, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a big part of prepping. Isn't just so we have stuff that everybody else doesn't. It's just so that we can also maintain a decent quality of life for ourselves and our families and our communities, rather than it just being everybody suffering together. Now, the problem is that the people who are suffering at some point in time eventually can become a threat because of what they're willing to do in order to mitigate that suffering. And that's another reason why we prepare. And of course, you know, when it comes to self-defense and stuff like that, you know, everybody likes to mention always like that this is not as important as food. We know, everyone knows, but you have to understand that in a big emergency where people are desperate and starving, that will be a situation that you'll have to probably deal with at some point. And especially if you are well set off and you're, you know, enjoying yourself and maintaining a decent quality of life when no one around you is, it's something to consider. And especially based on location. Where I live, it'd be very rare to see a bunch of random people showing up to try to cause problems. But if you live in a suburb or an urban environment, I mean, there you go. And I do want to say on our poll here, 89% said yes, this is all intentional. 11% said no. And so just kind of going off of those numbers, I would say that it's easy to see why this could be perceived as intentional. It's easy to understand why people who would want more control would do something like what's happening right now. I mean, it kind of just makes sense, right? But for the 11% who said no, you know, playing devil's advocate on that conversation, you can also understand why people would think that this all started maybe organically and was a problem that existed prior to a lot of the moves or motives that have been kind of pushing this thing along. I mean, we all knew the supply chain was fragile before last year. We all knew the supply chain was fragile 10 years ago. But it took that catalyst to really move things into overdrive. So if people aren't, thinking it's necessarily intentional, it's easy to at least admit then that what has occurred due to our lack of concern is now being utilized for more than what is really happening or required, right?
Right. Yeah. No, you said it. You said it well.
Trying to say things just the right way,
Yeah. No, it can be complicated. It's and it sucks. People harp on me all the time. It's the First Amendment. You should be able to say what you want. Yeah. But this platform has control of that. So and unfortunately, YouTube has this. It's one of the main platforms that we can shoot over to other platforms, but it's just for us to spread the message. This is one of the best options we have at the moment.
Yeah, and people in the chat are saying Travis Martin says crisis of convenience, and then let's see, like Griseo Nemo says I think it's a case of never let a disaster go to waste. Of course. So and that's been a huge talking point for years. Never let a good crisis go to waste. And
right,
this is quite a crisis. It's kind of the big whammy so far that we've dealt with in recent time. So, and I do want to say, Aaron Q, I'm sorry, I'm doing the best I can, but camera shy. Okay.
Oh man, I love it.
Yeah, once in a while, I got to get into the weird ones there. What I guess GreyMan. Just kind of trying to wrap my head around this whole situation. Do you foresee that we have kind of entered a new phase that isn't necessarily something we are going to exit at any point in time? Do you feel like regardless of the outcome at this point that we will be in a changed environment like from here on out?
Personally and honestly, I think so. I don't think things will ever go back to, let's say, several years ago. And some people will say, well, Grey, things have always been unstable or this or that. Not this bad. I mean, this is from my experience, and we all have different experiences in lives and the way we were raised and what we were surrounded in the cities that we live in and so on and so forth. But I've never seen things as chaotic as they are now. And every time I think that there's going to be a resolution to something else pops up and makes it worse. And it's just not, if it was just centralized to a certain specific population or area, right, then I could say, okay, well, once that gets resolved, that's not. But it's spread all over the entire globe. Everywhere you look, from fuel shortages, power shortages, food shortages, it's just not centralized in any specific area. I think it's going to run its full circle. And I pray, and some of you guys are not religious, so I guess I shouldn't use that word. But I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that I'm wrong about what I'm saying, and I hope that it resolves itself and everything goes back to hunky-dory and living the American dream. But me personally, I just don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm in the same boat as well, and I think that when you've seen the level of indoctrination in such a large portion of the population and the willingness to kind of accept the new truth of the way things are by a huge portion of the population, those people are definitely not going to go back to the way things were before. So I think that's a huge part of this conversation, is understanding that proportionately, the majority of people aren't going to be able to just revert back to 2019. And right. that's just kind of like where I've come to at this point. Even when you just talk to people, the types of conversations you have and the concerns that the average person seems to have about some of the things happening kind of shows you the mindset of what's out there. The concept that like, oh, this is just how things are now, and it's like, oh man, unfortunately, right? But then that starts a whole nother conversation as to, well, what do you mean?
Right. Yeah. And I agree with you 100%. And the reason I say that is because at my place of business or where I work at, the conversations have changed over the years. And now people are always conversating or having conversations about all the issues that we're having, or people either complaining about the gas or complaining about their jobs. Like restaurants they work at, like, hey man, it's driving me nuts. We don't have enough employees. I'm working 60 hours. We can't get enough on our trucks. We're always running out of stuff. So it's just, it's consistent in everybody. I mean, and I see probably several hundred people a day, and out of those several hundred, at least, let's say 40-50% of them have conversations with me and say these things, be it in the medical field, be it in the restaurant business, and so on and so forth. It's, I deal with a lot of different types of individuals, construction and so on and so forth. And I hear it's not to one specific group of people. Like I said, it's all over the place, and it's affecting every single person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say generally negatively.
Yeah.
It's
Agreed.
unfortunate because, mental health has taken the hugest toll this past year and a half, I would say, as an entire nation. Just the fact that people can't even wrap their head around what's happened to them or what is happening in the future. And there's no real hope left for a lot of people. And that creates its own version of a crisis that we can't really address as easily as stocking up on food and making sure we have our bare necessities, I do want to say, Fat Man Prepper says citizens in fear gives the government more power to remove, revoke, cancel basic human freedoms. And yeah, of course. And fear is always like one of the biggest driving factors for why people allow for things to move forward when it comes to anything related to authoritarianism. Okay. And that was used throughout history multiple times. And, it just, I hate beating, a drum like that. And I hate beating a dead horse, but the whole, history repeats itself thing, it's just really annoying that it does, it bothers me that it just happens again and again and again. And then people still refuse to learn from it and then use it to give their own confirmation bias, something that they want, in the sense of, I'll use this historical fact to kind of make my point about this argument I have about some kind of like political situation, but they won't use that historical fact to reference what's actually happening to people on a wide scale basis, and it's really frustrating that we've gotten to that point where, history itself has become politicized rather than just being a lesson,
I just saw something, and Aaron Garcia, he lives in Texas, and things are really bad. Yeah, I literally, I went over this on Sunday on my Sunday video, that the cartels are literally firing at our National Guardsmen over the border. I mean, that blows me away. When in history have we ever seen that kind of craziness?
Yeah, well, and at the end of the day, the financing behind those groups is larger than some of the militaries around the world. So people have to understand that it's not just, militaries, it's not just people who are aggressive or whatever it might be. There are entities out there that have a lot more power than anyone wants to admit that will definitely be a big, big problem if things ever fall apart, But I don't want to get involved with saying anything bad about those people because I know what they're up to. So. We're good. We're good here. Okay. There might be a reason why I learned Spanish, so I just figured to throw that out there just in case. So, but I will say, what was that?
No, I was just saying I'm fluent myself.
Yeah, no, it's a good skill to have, man. It's a good skill to have, and I have a good time throwing it out there once in a while. So, I did see somebody said something interesting I wanted to talk about, and of course I lost it here. Okay, Universal Prepper says they are creating worker shortages so they can introduce more robots and AI to replace humans, which we did discuss earlier, but if you weren't here at that time, yes. And the biggest thing, the takeaway from that everyone needs to keep in mind is that robots don't have leeway. It's yes or no. It's green check or red X. If you provide the thing that it's asking for, you'll get the pass. If you do not provide it, you will get the X. And that's why automation is going to keep moving forward in those areas, because there's no leeway for someone to say, I don't care about that. You can come on in and do whatever you got to do. It's going to be put the thing in the card slot, and if it says you're good, or if it doesn't, you're not. And yes, that's a much easier system of dealing with people who are not compliant in the future for whatever they want to use automation for, whether or not it's metal detectors or whether or not it's for other forms of passes that we all might be required to carry at some point, right?
Yeah, papers, please.
Yeah. Let's see. So Aaron Garcia says 6+ states sending their National Guard for migrants. I think not. They are a foreign proxy force. Interesting. And, I mean, there's a lot of speculation around that concept as well, that these large caravans that, try to enter the country through the southern border generally could easily be infiltrated by bad actors. So I think
Right.
that is always something that should be considered as well. But just to kind of maybe alleviate you a little bit on that one, Aaron, or at least to make everyone feel better, I'm trying to keep things in a positive light. There's tons of sleeper cells already in the United States. So we're fine. They're already here. It's not a big deal. Hopefully that made everyone feel better, because that's what I was going for there. So, one more article to share on the screen. I just want to kind of keep the conversation rolling, and just so everybody knows, like, make sure you guys do check out GreyMan Prepping, especially if you like this format. You like live chats, you like interviews with other preparedness channels, you like seeing, people's perspectives and ideas about what's happening in the world. Definitely go to his channel, subscribe, and check it out, because he's constantly interviewing other preparedness people, including myself before, where, you can get some new ideas or talk to people within the community, especially here in the live chat, which is a great networking tool. So I just wanted to kind of go ahead and throw that out there and make sure everybody gets the message there. And then mods, if you can make sure to share, GreyMan's channel once again, that'd be amazing. So, and Aaron Garcia, thanks for the super chats. I appreciate it. Facts, now take my money. Fair enough. Okay. So article of choice here. This is just another opinion related piece from the Atlantic. Look, I'm not the vetter of news sources. I don't go through and say, well, these people are, related to this political party or whatever it is. When something's relevant to the conversation, and if it's from if the article itself seems to have some validity or at least some information in it that I felt useful, then we're going to reference it. And this is basically, this article is talking about how we're running out of everything. It's not talking about, oh my gosh, like the shipping supplies are falling behind, or the coffee, or it's saying that, we're basically finding ourselves in a situation where soon it's just everything shortage, right? And that's what we've been talking about. But we're going into a season where people are going to raise their demand. And that combination creates a extreme tension on the supply chain that's already fragile. And it's going to cause even more shortages related to everything, not just the stuff that we're concerned about as preppers and people who are worried about survival, but it's also just for anything you want to acquire. I mean, and we're talking holidays, we're talking, toys, shoes, clothes, Christmas trees, all the stuff that, people are used to going out and getting this time of year. Good luck. And I mean, you guys really need to think about this. Like, even your turkey for Thanksgiving, stuff like that is going to be hard to come by. And, one thing I do want to mention, and I'm sure you can chime in on this, GreyMan, but you get a lot of people who I don't know if it's necessarily naysaying, but they want to inject the conversation with the fact that where they are, they don't see this being a problem. And that's fine. Where I am, there's not as many shortages in relation to a lot of things because of the lower population and the demand. The demand isn't quite there the same way as it is in other places. But that doesn't mean that this situation doesn't exist and isn't a problem. And what, in my experience, and what I've 100% experienced this here in North Dakota, and anyone in the area can probably attest to this, but just we'll relate it right to the ammo shortage, okay? The ammo shortage here didn't affect this area nearly as fast as everyone else, through the point where everyone was trying to figure out where to get, different types of ammo and how they were, going to fulfill their needs for basic cartridges. Over here, I could still buy anything I wanted. And I wasn't even limited on it for a very long time. But eventually that all went into place. Eventually I couldn't get, 9mm. Eventually I couldn't get more than 1 or 2 boxes a day. It just took longer. So yes, It might not be an issue in your area, but it doesn't mean it won't be at some point. I mean, do you feel the same way about that situation?
Yeah, I've talked to folks because I've looked at the population density where I'm at is roughly about 800,000, which sounds like a lot, but it's not as much as, like, let's say cities like, because I'm in Florida, it's not like cities like, let's say Miami or something like that, where the population densities in the millions. And a lot of the I've noticed when it comes to shipping companies and stuff like that, where's the profit at? The profit is going to be at where the hubs are people, so they sell more there. So of course they're going to try to keep that stocked more than they're going to keep the rural area stocked. But then it kind of plays out in just exactly what you said, that the density there is not as much. You don't see it disappearing as fast. But now, being that we're 18 or so months in or plus at this point, I've talked to some folks now, and they're saying that they're starting to see these issues in the rural areas now when it comes to food or different supplies and issues like that. Even here where I've noticed and this is a pretty populous city. I don't live in the city, but I live on the outskirts. But when I go, I try to reference multiple stores to kind of see if it's just specific to, let's say, one grocery store. And then I go to like the large chains, and then I see it all over the place. So I think people are going to see it everywhere at this point, because it's so far gone.
Yeah. And I mean, today I went out and had to get some silicone in order to seal up some, wood that's over my kitchen sink, right? In order to make it protected from getting any water damage. And I had a hard time finding a clear coat silicone that I wanted to use rather than white, because in the shop that I was at today, white was like the bee's knees, apparently. And that's what I'm saying. Like in the past, it wouldn't be an issue. I'd walk in and I'd walk right out with the exact thing I needed. And now I'm having to compromise. Like, well, I had to buy a tube of silicone that was $3 more expensive than the one I would have bought, but that one was out of stock. And, as an example, that is another thing everyone should be aware of, that the things that are affordable and budget friendly always go first. So keep that in mind when you're trying to prioritize your preps and the stuff that you're trying to acquire, because that's the stuff that everyone else is going to try to spend their money on first, so they can make their money go that much further. But that should be obvious, right?
Right.
So, and real quick in the article, I just want to say, like, the everything shortage is not the result of one big bottleneck. We're running low on supplies of all kinds due to a veritable hydra of bottlenecks. And that's kind of what we talked about earlier, is that it's not one traffic jam. It's tons and tons of traffic jams around the entire world that are causing this situation. And you can't fix every traffic jam at the exact same time. And then right here is actually a link to another article they have, which is Americans have no idea what the supply chain really is. So, you can see, and this article is interesting. It has a lot of information. It has a lot of different, reasonings behind why this stuff is happening the way it is. And you can see it's a pretty long read. It was decently informative, but the overall, I guess, cliff notes of the article was to say that we are experiencing an everything shortage. It will get worse, and we are also it is also due to many, many factors. There is not one problem that's causing this restriction. It's a huge problem that's built up of tons and tons of other problems, and that's why a solution isn't easily accomplished.
I've been studying the supply chain just because I'm curious on how it works, just beyond labor shortages and stuff like that. I've been trying to analyze how it works, and there's videos specifically on how supply chain works outside of the Prepperverse, of course, reading that kind of material. And it's pretty intriguing in how the supply chain works and how fragile it actually is. When one, like I said, I always call it the cog, but when one piece gets taken away, how it collapses on itself and all these issues arise. And now, of course, there's multiple pieces being pulled out. So which is going to, this goes to say, the title of the thing, the full collapse. It's like, how many more pieces are there left before it does everything full collapse on itself,
Yeah. And, it'll be a chain reaction. And somebody in the chat even said it'll be, domino effect. Dennis Nixon, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Once parts of it went down, it all went down. And it's like, yeah, exactly. Like, you lose one domino and it takes a long time for them all to fall and eventually hit the last one. But once it's started, it doesn't stop unless there's some space and separation. And I guess, if you wanted to apply that idea to what's happening right now, that's kind of like the breathing room we were talking about earlier. All anyone needs wants to do is take a breath and kind of, let this thing settle for a second so it can get back on track. The problem is that our system is in such high demand and so in such a tight time constraint that if they do take a breath, that in itself will create even more shortages. Even if they're only temporary, they'll be more extreme because that's how reliant we are on the whole system, you know?
I wanted to touch on something real quick because I know we're getting close. When I was in Walmart, I went all over the entire store because I'm curious about everything. That's just the way my mind works. And I went looking for turkeys. And usually they had this huge thing. We're in October now. Usually they have this huge freezers with a bunch of turkeys in there. I couldn't find it. Couldn't find it out in the stores. So that was like, I was quite intrigued to see that there was no turkeys already. You know, because people buy turkeys, you put them in your freezer and get them all prepped up and whatnot. But
and it's the time to buy usually, like early, not at the rush. You know, you're not going to have to worry about it when the time comes, and it's not the case right now.
And thanks, South Florida. For some of the folks in there, I see people in the chat, you know, saying certain things, and you know, I usually don't cater to some of those folks, but you have a car, right? And you pay insurance for your car, never knowing if you're ever going to get into an accident. You pay whatever your premium is for your car, in hopes that if anything ever does happen, that your car is replaced or it gets fixed or whatnot. You have to look at prepping in the same manner. It's not like a waste of time or money. It's an insurance policy for survival and the way you live if something does happen. So it's an insurance for your family, your extended family, however you have it set up in your life. And that's how I look at prepping. It's just an insurance policy for the survivability of my family. And I hope some folks can take away from that, you know, you throw away money at, let's say, this insurance or that insurance and all the other insurances that you pay that you may never use. But prepping is very similar in the aspect, not saying that you will never use it, because here's how I look at it. If, let's say in my lifetime, nothing ever happens, great. I'm happy. You know what I mean? But I've learned in my life that things always happen. Hopefully that you got your family prepared. Let's say your son, your daughter, whoever, you pass that along to them. So they're more prepared. So it's like an endless cycle. I don't know. That's just my opinion. I just wanted to share that real quick. Survival insurance. Exactly, Charlie.
Well, and I think another way to approach that too, especially for people who are more skeptical or maybe don't want to dive, you know, full bore into like the 25-year shelf life preparedness concept of long-term SHTF, right? But if you want to be better prepared and then you want something that's functionable and reasonable, then, you know, a rotational pantry really is where it's at. Being able to, you know, have a year or two's worth of food on hand that you rotate out and actually eat is probably the best way to go, because you always have food on hand, you're stocked up, but you also are utilizing your preps in the meantime. So you're never feeling like you just have money on the shelf. It's always being eaten, you have what you need. But you know, you don't have to go to the grocery store sometimes. You don't have to worry about if things go bad. You don't have to worry about a natural disaster or a hurricane or something. So, you know, that would be my suggestion for anybody who's skeptical about it or maybe not willing to go into the entire concept all the way through. But at least start a rotational pantry of sorts and just kind of consider that your preps, you know? And I do want to say, somebody asked, let's see here. Roaming Preppers here. Good to see you. Harvey Black said, you know, would you suggest people prep a bit in many areas or go 100% in one area, i.e. food? And I think the better answer to that question is to break the categories down into percentages. And you have to have, it's an imbalance. You can't have a balanced amount of prepping in every category either. You want food and water to take up a huge portion of that pie chart. And then you want to, you know, focus on your other things as being, you know, still a priority, but not as important as those two major factors of just basic survival. And then you move into things like backup power, you move into things like actual skills or training, you move into things like medical and first aid, self-defense. All that stuff starts taking up smaller pieces of the pie, but you do want to, you know, really focus on those two major ones in the beginning, just because without those, you'll actually die. Whereas with, you know, without power, I mean, you can live. You know, yeah, you might be in a very cold environment, and that would be really hard possibly. But without water or food, I mean, you're guaranteed to not make it. So, I mean, would you say about the same thing, GreyMan?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Water is key to survival. You can go without food for 3-4 weeks if you had to. It would suck. Don't get me wrong, it would suck. But water is huge. That's why I tell people, because people are like, well, how can I prep enough water for my family? And then people always talk about bugging out, but I'm probably I don't want to take it down another path because we'll be here for another hour. But with the water and food, that's your two major key components to survival. And then of course you move on. I usually start with water and food, and then I kind of gear towards some of the other necessities like medical and stuff like that. Just because I've experienced hurricanes before, and I've learned from experience that during a hurricane and a natural disaster like that, there is no help coming until the winds die down to a certain aspect. And you can call 911 all you want. If you're hurt, you better hope that you have the things there to fix yourself up.
Yep. And, so you can't go all in on one category. But, if I had to pick one to start with, I mean, I think for the ease of getting into the game and for the ease of having some peace of mind, I actually think food would be the easiest one to start with. Water is a different situation because it either requires large amounts of storage, which not everybody has space for, or it's, trying to figure out a way to acquire your own water via maybe like a solar pump for a well, or maybe you have a rain catchment system. But basically a lot of water endeavors either end up being expensive or take up a lot of space. And so with water, I would more, think about just basic things like some filters, some ways to clean water, make water potable, like a Berkey or something like that. And then I would, understand the water I have within my home, maybe buy some of those water bobs that you put in your tub. Know that you have access to your water heater and stuff like that. Whether or not you care about Legionnaire's disease is up to you. But I think if I had to get someone started, I would tell them to start with food. Because yes, water is extremely imperative to survival, but prepping water is a more complicated task than it sounds compared to stockpiling food. Buying non-perishables is kind of easy to do at the end of the day,
Right. No, I agree. And to touch on your water, it's like you said, knowing all the different facets of how to purify water, be it boiling or using, bleach and just knowing, having proper water filtration, like you said, the Berkey, the Sawyer, water purification tablets. There's a lot of big gambits when it comes to the water processing water.
Yeah.
Food is truly important, and it's usually, like I said, that's usually the easiest to start diving into and building that pantry and start learning how to rotate and keep things running smoothly.
Right. And I mean, and it's also just explaining it to someone newer to the game is so much easier too, even in the sense of numbers and like quantifiable resource. You buy 5 cans of food and that's enough food for you to eat for 2 days. Good job, Versus you have 300 gallons of water. Well, here's what you have to decide: what water is used for this, what water are you going to use for that? Are you storing it in a way that's going to be potable? Are you going to have to function with it afterward? There's a lot of thought process in the water, which is so annoying because it's so boring.
Yeah,
it's such a necessity,
No, I agree. And that it's good to know food, how many calories you need on a daily basis, depending on your size and your frame, and what you consume and stuff like that. It's some of it can be boring, but it's beneficial to know this stuff. You know what I mean?
Right. I did see Roaming Prepper. Thank you for the beer money or pew pew money or whatever. What did he say? Pew money, I think. So I appreciate it. Pew seeds. There we go. Okay. So thank you for that. I appreciate it, and I will definitely try to buy 1 round of 9mm with that $4.99. So that was a joke, just to be a joke. Stuff's pricey right now, And then Reload asked, what's your opinion of the Augustin Farms news? So we actually touched base on that at the beginning of the live stream. So if you want to watch the re-upload after this is over, then you'll get a lot of info about that there. But basically at the end of the day is that there's other companies saying that they're going to be able to still maintain their production level and still be able to push out their product, even though it's the same exact genre as Augustin Farms. But GreyMan and I still agreed that regardless of that information, it's still an indicator and a red flag of things being in a very bad situation at this point in time. That's not the kind of news you expect to hear from a company like that whose main game is preparedness. So I just wanted to touch base on that. But yes, we did discuss it quite a bit earlier on. Let's see.
I see a bunch of people talking about here in Florida, pools are huge. Everybody almost has a pool here in Florida. Right. And I see what some folks are saying. And yes, you can scoop a 5-gallon bucket out of a pool and let the sun evaporate the chlorine out of it and make it even drinkable.
Yeah. Just make sure there's no alligators or water markets. I may have jumped in a couple pools in my day that had those things in them. So, and awesome. The pools are screened in even because of mosquitoes, and yet still, man, those things figure it out. They get in. And I just so everyone is aware, I grew up in Florida. I lived in Florida for the first 20 years of my life. So,
interesting.
I am a Floridian and I am a Florida man, which means I will eat your face if I have to. Okay. And GreyMan is too. So y'all better watch out because there's 2 of us here. You never know what's going to happen. So I just want to go ahead and let you guys know we're at an hour and a half. And I think we're going to start wrapping it up here because usually we only go for an hour. But it's been a really good conversation. There's a lot of good information. There's been a lot of good back and forth in the chat. And, I just enjoyed having you on here tonight, GreyMan, and just kind of hanging out. And getting your opinion on some things. I think that this is valuable. Building this community, this network, working with each other, collaborating, and trying to spread more awareness is extremely, powerful, and I think very important, especially in the times that we're currently in.
No, I agree, and I appreciate you taking the time and let me come on and chat with you, man. Like I said, when we're talking about channels and stuff like that, I never thought that I'd be on the same screen with people that I've been watching for years.
Yeah, no, 100%, and it's rewarding, and it's also kind of a weird reality check, and it helps you remember that you're not alone. It's not just you. And the one thing I do like about the live chats, maybe slightly better than the traditional format videos, is that not everything is like scripted or pre-thought out or anything like that. We're just having a conversation and, referencing some articles and stuff to kind of keep the conversation on track. But a lot of good banter occurs here that wouldn't have otherwise happened. And I do think that interacting with the community here and everybody here in the chat is extremely rewarding as well. I really like being able to talk to everybody directly and, get ideas from the people that are part of this community as well. It's I don't think of everything. So some of the stuff I saw in the chat tonight was really eye-opening and thought-provoking. I figured, okay, well, that's some stuff to look into. And like that one comment about Augustin Farms having to, make their food specifically for the government. I mean, there might not be any validity to that, but it would also be something worth looking into and be interesting to find out if there was any correlation there,
Yeah, no, agreed.
Let's see. Banter Rider says, I never covered machetes. What I'll say is that everyone should just have one solid machete at the least. But 2 is 1 and 1 is none, so don't forget, okay? And there is a time and a place for dual-wielding machetes in SHTF. If I have to make that video, I will. So, in fact, I think I just got another great idea for another humor-involved video. Yeah, I think I did. So I think that series might have to continue, like Marauders in the apocalypse or like post-apocalypse or whatever it might be, and it, like being these like obscure characters that like don't have any clue as to what they're doing, and everything's to the extreme. So I think I could keep that rolling. I think.
Yeah, James says wear the wig. Make sure you wear the wig.
When you have access to the amount of wigs I have access to, things get weird.
Oh man, that's hilarious. And I know someone said something. Someone's talking about me squinting, and it's because I have a fan blowing in my eye. But at least I'm not sweating because it's Florida, and it's still nastily hot in Florida.
Yeah. Hey, no worries. I have something literally in my eye, so I don't know what's going on with that either. And I've been messing with it all night. I'm like, what in the heck is in my eye right now? I will say, Shotguns Machete says, Matt, your hair is crazy. And this is my cue to remind everyone that I do not dye my hair. It just grows the way it grows with the white in the front. And that I do feel the need to relatively, regularly remind everyone of that because of the negativity I get around my hair. It's out of control, actually. You guys would be surprised. Like, it's a good thing I have thick skin because, like, I might have already buzzed my head by now if I didn't, feel like it was just what I had to do. So,
man.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I should probably be GreyMan Prepping because I, am turning gray at a very early stage in my life. At least I like to think that anyway.
We'll switch for a while. You guys can call me Magic and call him Gray.
yeah, we're doing role reversal. It's going to be a good time. And someone said I was born punk rock, and that is, I'm cool with that, actually. Yeah. And real quick rant, right? But punk rock used to be like anti-establishment, and all the punk rock bands I used to listen to in my early days, right? And all the punk rock that was out there that was super like just like everything government's bad. They all are just like super Democrats now. And whether or not you're like political or you care about political affiliation, I just find it ironic that these guys who are just punk rock and everything was like anti-establishment decided that, that particular party was anti-establishment. I just haven't figured out how you can join either party if that's your whole gig, but that's just me. Okay. So that was just something I had to rant about because it kind of bothers me. I'm like, you guys were anti-government everything, and now you're like at campaign rallies. I don't understand,
Oh man, these comments sometimes they just make me laugh. But thank you all for watching. You know what I mean? Thanks those guys for watching. You're sitting here just to say those things. I love it, man.
No, it's great. It's great. And for anyone who asked if I was gay, I'm not. So now you know. But if that's what you're into and you want to still believe that for your own personal reasons, then you go ahead. All right.
Oh Lord.
All right. So we'll wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for being here. This chat is awesome, and I do really just like hanging out with everybody. I really do, and I'm glad that we can all have this kind of fun too in the chat. I'm not trying to make everything so serious where we all feel like the end of the world is tomorrow. That's not the point of these conversations. The point is so we can help everybody prepare, see what's coming, talk about some of the stuff that's on the horizon, and then have a good time once in a while too, because we still have to live our lives, everybody. We still want to enjoy the lives that we have. It's not about doom and gloom on a 24/7 basis. So just keep that in mind. And is there anything you want to address before we sign off here, Grey?
No, I had a good time, man. Thanks for having me, man. And if you guys get a chance, check out my channel if you want. You may like it, you may not. You don't have to subscribe. You can check it out first, and if you like it, then subscribe. So,
yeah, and tell them that douchebag Magic Prepper sent you. So, all right, well, you guys have a good night. Thanks so much for everything, and we will see you next time. And I'll do my thing because I have to, and that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.